Chapter 1172. There have been so many breaks. It feels as though there's been more breaks than chapters over the last 2 months at least, but I think we're back to regular scheduling now. In other news, this isn't One Piece related, it's kind of One Piece adjacent since they share the same animation studio. Following its 40th anniversary event, it's been announced that the Dragon Ball anime is going to be returning with the next arc of the manga, the Galactic Patrol or the Moro arc, and I feel that just deserves a mention because it's big news, it's Dragon Ball. But circling back to the One Piece anime, the staff had a meeting where the core message was essentially they're gonna go all out for this, but also the man responsible for the sound effects in the anime has retired after 30 years on the job working on One Piece and Dragon Ball, which is really great news for a ton of people because the sound effects of the anime have really gotten to them, and while they've never bothered me that much, it's still obvious they were so dated, so new and upgraded sound effects is gonna be huge for the anime when it returns, if that's actually what's happening, because maybe the next guy just comes in and plugs in the same sounds that this guy was. But the anime is making strides, which is music to my ears, and you know what else is music to my ears? No break next week. So on to the chapter. It's a setup one and we get refreshed on a lot of things, which is very important, especially if you remember we haven't been back here in 20 chapters, 7 months, so I think it's justified and necessary. But also it's just very convenient as a quick summary of what's happening, who's doing what, how each of the knight's abilities are being used. If you need any clarification, then this is the perfect spot to come back to revisit. Plus, not every reader is the same as us. They don't dissect each panel and don't remember every detail, so stuff like this is good to have. So the chapter opens with the group who are heading up to the Sun World on that elevator, and as they move up the tree, Gobon updates them on the current situation so they are prepared for what's to come, otherwise they would have been screwed the moment they stepped off the elevator. And what they see as soon as they arrive does a pretty good job at showcasing the current chaos. They also managed to find an injured Kashi who has managed to evade being dummy reversied. So on the topic of that ability, first of all, what's the range of it? I'm guessing the range is the equivalent of the board. So is it the entirety of the Sun World? How far can Emu stretch this ability? Let's say one giant stood at one end of the Sun World and another one stood at the other end. Would anyone who walked directly in between them be flipped as well, if the range is actually this big? I'm guessing the rules of the actual game Reversi are going to be very relevant in the near future, but also in a separate aspect, we have seen 3 times where characters have been controlled or twisted by Emu, and each time has been different in some way from the others. The giants have been physically flipped here. Zebek was stabbed to initiate his turn, and Harald wasn't turned at all. He was only mentally flipped with no transformation. Is there a greater reason for each version? Like the dummy reversi is for those who don't have the covenant, while Harald did have the covenant, which is why he wasn't flipped, he wasn't dummy reversied. And as for the other 2 times we've seen it with the giants here and Zebek on God Valley, maybe it's because Emu was there on God Valley while here they're only controlling somebody else's body. And also, to what extent does this affect Emu themselves, like their own stamina being drained or something, because they turned Dorian Brogy directly, personally, while the other giants only turned because they were in between those 2, and so on and so forth, a chain reaction kind of. So would only the initial turn of Dorian Brogy affect their stamina while everyone else turning wouldn't, because that's indirect, you know? They aren't actually doing anything there. There's the book as well. I forgot about the giant grimoire which they summoned out of thin air, maybe using the abyss, and pulled out a giant double-barrel shotgun to shoot off Brogy's hand. We have Loki, Luffy and Emu who all can just do stuff for one reason or another. So Kashi gives an explanation of his own and this current group decides to split up. The first thing is that it turns out Bjorn, one of the kidnapped kids, is Rhodes' younger brother, which is cool because I really enjoy learning about who these kids are connected to, like Ylva being the great-granddaughter, I believe, of Jarul, and I can kind of see the resemblance between Rhodes and Bjorn, with each of them having one eye covered by their hair. Let's hope Bjorn doesn't become as big of a creep as his brother currently is. Anyway, this is just a simple way to up the stakes even just slightly, a tiny bit more, because, for example, an extreme example, part of why Ace's death was so devastating was because of how we saw Luffy react. You can picture how horrible it would be for these people if anything were to happen to these kids, so I'm sure none of them are going to die, not even Oda's that's sadistic, though kidnapping is still very much on the table. So Road, Goldberg and Gerd head off in that direction for Bjorn and the other kids. Zoro and Hiruden move to help Jarul, while Sanji moves to help Nami and Robin, and by extension the rest of the crew, as well as moving to deal with the fires at the library and school. So that's in the direction of the Holy Knights, or at least Summers, who, if I remember correctly, he was nearby when the Straw Hats were tied up. So it's not going to be Zoro and Sanji versus Dory and Brogy, which is what I thought it would be, because those two are very big problems at the moment. Instead, Hyruden is gonna get some time to shine, which is really good to hear. Loki isn't the only brother who's gonna be given the spotlight, but aside from Hyruden getting a power boost in this fight, if you remember back in Big Mom's backstory, we saw how he idolized Jarul and Yorul as the former co-captains of the giant warrior pirates, and obviously he's ended up becoming a pirate himself. I would really like to see what he says to Dory and Brogy, because he would have only met them very recently, since their duel began 20 years before Hyruden was even born, and I have no doubt he would have heard stories about these two and idolized them just as much. So I think that could be an interesting dynamic to see play out during their fight. We have a map, which is very much appreciated, giving us a look at where everybody is, and we move on to the Straw Hats, all of whom are still tied up except for one. And even while tied up, it's cool to see each of their priorities, which match up well with how we've known them. Robin's focus is on the library burning, of course. That's the legacy of her people, and even beyond that, she's the one who understands the meaning of those books the most. And I'm happy the library is being addressed, because I was thinking before, on one hand it would seem odd that a point was made to show the giants saved the books from Ohara only for them to end up being burned here anyway. But I also don't mind the perspective that this is just what happens when the government wants knowledge erased. It's not fair, and that's just how it is. But also remember the clone of Vegapunk that Lilith has. This clone was the one that went to Elbaf and studied these books, so we still have access to the knowledge even though the library has been burned. But we also now have Sanji making his way to deal with the fire himself. Nami's main concern is the kids. We know she's always had a greater affinity towards them than most people. She's more caring in that respect thanks to her childhood with Belmay. Jinbei, our most experienced crew member, is looking out for the rest of the crew, noting Chopper's sustained absence, but also he mentions Brook had come to a realization and ran off on his own, so how the heck did he escape? Because he was wrapped up like a mummy. So we have two options based on what we know. Option 1, Brook is currently hopping around somewhere while still wrapped up, or option 2, he is just that guy and Brook forced his way out thanks to sheer will. And those two are very basic options. We don't know if the ability wore off for some reason, even though the other Straw Hats are still tied up, or if there's another thing at play here. But as for where Brook's going now, this is currently my favorite B-plot of the arc, because there's realistically only one place he's going, and this is why I saw fit to mention before that there's more to Emu being in Gunko's body than just us learning about their abilities, but also because of Brook, who is now, because of that takeover, is heading straight for Emu, the hidden ruler of the world. They're controlling Gunko's body, the body of a little girl who he knew back in his home kingdom, maybe the daughter of one of his friends, maybe Yoki's daughter. So this means we're gonna get more Straw Hat backstory, we're gonna get some answers on who Gunko is and what Emu has been doing behind the scenes for Gunko to be so close with them as their personal attendant. And again, most of all, it means Brook has a genuine connection to the final villain of the entire story, possibly the final villain, the hidden ruler, and Usopp, who I know the bar is kind of in hell at the moment, but I'm happy to see him given a bit of focus in the next few pages. We see some of the others making their way to the kids who are nearly at the port now, as we see Jarul, who is still refusing to run and taking the initiative, and he tells the entire country the truth of what actually happened 14 years ago when Harald lost his life, and he makes it known, makes it clear, Loki is innocent. It's a condensed version of the story, but the point gets across. So a quick reminder on what he's been doing and what he's been involved with up to this point. Jarul was forced to order the burning of the school and library in order to save the kids. He is also being targeted by the Domiroversi, Dory and Brogy, who want to declare themselves as the new kings of Elbaf, with Jarul refusing to back down because that is unbefitting of a warrior. So now here to this chapter, I'm pretty sure he's unaware of the truth having been revealed down below as well by Loki, but given that the government are now here and everything is falling apart, it's no use hiding who was truly responsible for Harald's demise when those people are also causing chaos right now. But also that means no amnesia for Jarul, which makes me think what's gonna happen now when the sword is pulled out, because I still think it will be. That's one of the things that I'm holding out hope for Usopp. The hammer or this sword are Usopp's two best options right now. But what's gonna happen to Jarul when it is removed, because I remember a point being made that he would bleed out if it was, although if he survived it being lodged in this deep, I think he can survive it being pulled out as well. Or what if one of Dory and Brogy pull it out themselves and Jarul just dies? I don't think it's out of the range of possibilities for Jarul to die here, because he is already very old, so it's kind of like giving him a a warrior's death. Now onto the topic of Loki having been vindicated, even though he never fought against the allegations in the first place. The truth has come out without him present, but I'm not disappointed by that, because if we reshuffle things, we know Loki along with Luffy will be the last one to get up to the Sun World, and I'm now picturing a new potential scenario where Loki will arrive, will join the fight, and he will be facing the very same people who have cursed him, scorned him, and hated him with every fiber of their being. But they won't be doing that anymore. These people will speak to him with more respect. They may apologize like Hiruden and his crew did, and they may even praise him for having gone through what he did. But the point is that what I'm most looking forward to seeing in this hypothetical scenario is how Loki reacts to no longer being the accursed prince. How will he react to no longer being the bane of everybody's lives? How will he react to overwhelming support? And by support, it doesn't even need to be anything direct. It could just be some random giants explaining the situation and not avoiding him. Nothing needs to be explicitly said. No one actually has to praise him like I suggested. He just needs to be off-put by no longer being hated, or hated to that extent, because they're not going to become best friends with him straight away, you know. And the reason why I say off-put is because this flashback made clear that he didn't have the capacity to properly show his affection or receive somebody else's. So what happens when you just dump the overwhelming support or overwhelming non-hatred on top of him? I can't think of a better word for some reason, but how will his brain process that when he can't even process Mosa giving him a small compliment? And we go back to Jarul again, because this is a really good speech. It's the way every line he says here is simultaneously putting down the world government and boosting the giants up. He says they are in need of great forces, meaning they are in trouble at the moment, and there's no others who better embody a great force than the giants themselves. If it's strength somebody wants, then there's only one place to go looking for it. They are here for another attempt. They are having to try again in conquering the nation, meaning they failed before. They were repelled once and they can be repelled again. Next, we see Imu in Gunko's body, which is important beyond just Imu's takeover abilities, but we see them here as well as the other knights preparing for a fight. And it's ironic how Sommers is saying the mission would succeed even if he took a nap, when we now know this guy failed at kidnapping one infant boy. The shamelessness knows no bounds, because again this plan hinges on them kidnapping kids to threaten the giants. So the speech continues, and as the school and library continue to burn, he talks of what they are willing to sacrifice for those same kids, and how no one will be able to break their spirit. The giants are not so easily broken. Harald carried the weight himself so he could spare everybody else, but now that weight is being shared by everyone in this country. And this next bit is my favorite part of the speech. Jarl questions rule over us, make us slaves. He's insulted by the fact someone would entertain the idea of them being capable of subduing the giants, the mightiest of the mighty. And even if you view it from the perspective that in their entities, pound for pound, the government is stronger than the giants of Elbaf, which I think is the case, who cares? Don't forget about their pride. Who cares if they are outmatched? One is only truly a warrior when they fight with the odds stacked against them. If you think you're better than us, then come prove it. Even the next line, we let you talk, we let you get a bit loud, and you've forgotten your place. Who are the government seeking out as a source of great strength? The giants, who scared Imu off and stopped them from messing with this country for 14 years until they had no other choice but to try again. The giants who ruled the Grand Line and the New World in the past. The giants. These are their waters. The little brother's getting a little too big for his boots, and it's time to put him back in his place. This speech has done a perfect job at hyping me up. We don't even need the fight to begin and my blood is pumping. And bringing in Usopp again, he's the perfect hype man for this situation, because he has a greater belief in the giants than anybody else. This is what made him fall in love with their culture. This is what he's been waiting to see. And the speech continues with Jarl addressing the kids, and now for the most intriguing part of the whole thing. If everything goes as the Harley foretold, then the world will be broken or separated into parts someday. Translations may differ here, so we will have to wait and see what Jarl's actually saying here. But for now, this is interesting because, for one, going back and revisiting the mural and the Harley text of the three worlds, nothing stands out to me or seems to indicate or point towards this what Jarl just said. So this is entirely new information. However, one major and arguably most widely accepted theory is that the red line is going to fall to make the world whole, not separated. So I'm guessing there is still more to the Harley text which we haven't seen. I mean, who even wrote the Harley text in the first place? But moving on, we have had my favorite line of the speech, we've had the most intriguing line of the speech, and now we have the most important line of the speech, because Elbaf now sees the world government as its enemy, which I take as meaning Jarul has just declared war against the world government. Remember, he is the de facto leader of the country, so I guess this is well within his rights to do. He has the authority to declare war. So I have incorrectly assumed at least once before, maybe multiple times before during this arc, that the final war had begun, that this was the first battle of the greater war, and now Jarul has straight up, no misinterpreting his words, no deciphering the meaning, he has fully declared war. So I'm gonna say it again for the nth time, that the final war has officially begun. And something like that makes more sense now than the previous times I've said it, because now we have Loki, who is free, and Emu, who is here. Last chapter I was talking about how the giants, we collectively assume they are the most important piece of the past, the most important race, even though we don't actually know as much as we think. But based on what we do know, like the giants' worship of sun god Nika, and with some more assumptions like Emu maybe being from Nika's time as well, far before the Void Century, maybe thousands of years ago. We don't know how long ago it was when Nika was around, but if it really was that long ago, then the giants may have a greater reason to declare war than anybody else. Their grudge goes back further than anybody else's. But also just overall props to Jarul, because after the flashback, which has recontextualized his position but also clarified his strength, yes, he was the first one down out of the four who were fighting Harald, but given his age he put up a very good showing. It's a lot clearer now why he is the hero of the giants, why he deserves that title, even though the same still can't be said for Jarul, his co-captain. But even then, I'm sure the title of hero wasn't given purely based on strength, maybe it was what they achieved as the captains. You see, this is a perfect SBS question for me, because it's nothing too major and it still expands on the story's lore, using characters from a long time ago which won't reveal anything in the upcoming story. Zoro takes a liking to Jarul, which makes me feel validated when I say he's one of the unsung heroes of the arc. Now we have the whole picture, now we're seeing what he's doing right now. Jarul deserves a ton of recognition, and Hyruddin even says he was the strongest 300 years ago, which I fully believe. This is what I mean, the perfect SBS question. It expands on the story, but it's not so important that it needs to be in the main story, so SBS. So the giants are all up to fight, I'm up to fight, Usopp's up to fight. Hopefully he's loving this speech, and I can only hope this means him seeing the giants wake up in a sense will also wake him up, inspire him to do something, anything substantial in this arc. Nami is rightfully pissed because they aren't free, but everybody is rallying, and the speech ends by saying they will protect the peace that Harald envisioned, peace which isn't something easily gained nor maintained, but peace is also not pure pacifism, which is something Jarul I think was also guilty of on top of Harald, because he said himself he withheld the truth to protect Harald's ideals. And with the present situation, it's okay to fight if it means protecting something dear to you, but also it should be your last resort, which is another reason Jarul didn't say anything. If the country could move forward without having to fight, then that's the path he would have chose, and he did try, but with the government making the first move here, the government being the ones to reinstigate everything, then fighting is the way to go now. Self-defense and everything, you know how it goes. And in the final few shots, Dory and Brogy leading the other Domiroversi giants have arrived at the western village, where Jarul along with the rest of the giants are ready to fight on their own. Although not far behind are the team of Zoro, Hyruddin and Stanson, and also know if they are caught in between the Domiroversi giants, then they will be done for as well. But have no fear, because at the end of the chapter Zoro says he has a plan. I'm shocked, but also I feel like I shouldn't be shocked, but I'm still shocked, because it's Zoro. He knows how to fight, he has a high battle IQ, but he is also not a very tactical person. His plans, like the one in Dressrosa to defeat Pika, aren't usually very thought out or detailed. Even all the way back in Whiskey Peak, his plan was to fake being drunk and go from there. So what is this idea? They all know, thanks to Loki's tale of 14 years ago, as well as what Gaban said before that, Conqueror's Haki is very important. So I have a thought, a plan for Zoro, which is a good plan, but also it's gonna have a greater effect than Zoro intended. So kind of like a Kinemon moment where he has a plan and things kind of just work out for the better afterwards. So the first step is to corral all of the Domiroversi giants in one place to make it easier for them to deal with, meaning Hyruddin and his crew and everybody else are going to surround them, force them into a smaller place. But here's the important part, and I don't really know if this is how the game works, the real Reversi board game, but based on the one rule I do know, and we all know now, that a piece flips when it's in between two opposing pieces. So if these guys are able to surround them, it would make them all much easier to deal with. That could be Zoro's plan, but to take it a step further to what Zoro doesn't intend, mind because he doesn't know. If we are able to fully surround them in a circle, then wouldn't that mean that these giants would be in between us at any given point around the circle, meaning they would all flip back, which would altogether mean Zoro was able to come up with a half-decent plan, but it went even further than he expected and it worked out for the better. It doesn't make him a tactical genius all of a sudden. So next chapter, Zoro initiates his plan, war begins, and Brook is about to do something crazy to Imu, although I don't know what because again it's Brook. This could be a way of seeing whether Gunko is still in there or not, whether she is able to maintain her consciousness in the passenger seat. Will she try to wrestle back control? Is she even able to? How was Imu even able to alter her memories to this extent anyway? Also, Luffy and Loki never made an appearance, so I think since the rest of them made their way at the end of this chapter, those two will make their way up at the end of next chapter. And as much as we are hyping up seeing Loki fight, I really want to see Luffy fight again, because think about what's at play here. Who's on the battlefield? We have Loki and the rest of the giants who have this image of the sun god in their minds, whether a good or bad one. We have the holy knights and we have specifically Imu here, so how will they all react to seeing the sun god before their very eyes? Because even if you don't think Luffy is the strongest on the island, thanks to Imu being here, he is still gonna have the greatest presence. It's been so long since we've seen Gear 5 in a proper fight, and what better battlefield is there for him to return to than this one?